Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Spooney's Scrapbook. I'm Mike Kenichi, and of course, he's John Sponheimer. And Coach, I want to thank you for coming on again today. It's always fun doing this with you. But Coach, I wanted to ask you before we begin. That Thanksgiving game last week was proof to me that you should never do away with Thanksgiving football games because the crowd at that game was tremendous. I mean, the atmosphere was awesome, and I just don't like what they're trying to do, doing away with Thanksgiving games. What are your thoughts about that?
Mike, I love Thanksgiving football. I first went to the Derby-Shelton game in 1956. I was 9 years old, and I went to every Thanksgiving Day game until I played high school football. The only time I ever missed a Thanksgiving Day game, either as a player, a parent, or a coach, was one year when I was at Cornell. We had to stay after Thanksgiving in 1967, and the season ended a week on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. So I love Thanksgiving football. Tom Brockett is a huge advocate of keeping Thanksgiving football here in Connecticut, as is Lou Marinelli of the famous coach at New Canaan. So hopefully clearer minds will prevail and make sure that Thanksgiving football stays the same. One thing I feel, I know it's still great when you're playing a Thanksgiving rivalry, but some of the teams that play on Tuesday night or even Wednesday night, I know they get an extra day for the playoffs. But to me, there's absolutely nothing like playing on Thanksgiving morning. It's a great feeling, and I hope it stays that way forever.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the best Thanksgiving rivalries is Ansonia and Naugatuck. And I mean, I heard them talk about Columbus Day playing that day, which makes no sense. And it's like you said, too. I mean, if you play it on a Tuesday night, it doesn't have the same feeling. I mean, Thanksgiving, you talk about kids come home from school, they're able to go to that game. It's like, people get to kind of reconnect with each other at that game as well. So I just think that it would be such a negative thing to do if they got rid of that not just that rivalry, but any Thanksgiving rivalry.
That's absolutely true. Especially, no matter what school you're at, a chance to play on Thanksgiving meant so much, and I just hope that it continues the way it has been.
Right, definitely. So, Coach, let me ask you. We're going to talk about 1992, and that was one of my favorite years in high school football. Probably because at that point I was a sophomore at Derby, so I got to kind of experience what football games were like on Friday nights and things like that, Saturday mornings. But 92 was a real fun year for me. But Ansonia in 92, they had some returners, but they also had a lot of kids playing for the first time. And one of them was your quarterback, Dave Pacheco. Now, he had played varsity, but just not at the quarterback position. So, I mean, you're replacing a good quarterback like Rich Lester. I mean, were there any concerns about David taking the reins at quarterback?
I wouldn't say concerns. We knew David wasn't experienced, but we had seen him play in JV games, and when he was a freshman, he was an excellent quarterback, but he got hurt playing in a varsity game when the game was sort of got out of hand, and he got banged up pretty good, and he missed half the year. But we were very confident, especially when we saw him in the scrimmages, and he was an excellent athlete. He was tough. He could run the ball if necessary, and he was a great leader among the group. And we had some exceptional players that made for a very fine year.
Yeah, and Coach, you brought up freshmen, which I'm kind of glad you did because that freshman team you had in '92 was an unbelievable team. I think they went 11-0 that year. Obviously, Stephen Coughlin was your quarterback, but interestingly enough, Coach, it was kind of a little strange because Stephen practiced a lot with the varsity, so he would kind of do the offense with you guys, and do Team D and stuff. But really, he practiced a lot of the time with the varsity. So, he kind of had the double dip a lot that year. So that's a credit to him. But that 92 freshman team, you had a lot of talent. I think you had a kid by the name of Mike Barnabucci who came from Shelton. He had moved to Ansonia. You had Jeff Gregorio who moved from Derby to Ansonia. Your line was unbelievable. Roy Alberti, I think it was his first year playing. He did very well. So talk about that 92 freshman team a little bit.
Like you said, it was an excellent class. Stephen Coughlin basically started as a varsity receiver. He was a flanker. He played some slot, but he was he would practice with us for a while during the day as a freshman and run the offense. Then he would go over and practice with the varsity the whole time. But he virtually played 2 whole games. Well, he played probably half a game for us for most of the time, but he played as a as a as a receiver, as I said. Plus, it was important that he got some quarterbacking experience, because when he played Pop Warner, he was big, but they had him as a tackle, as an end. He never really played quarterback until we got him as a freshman, and we figured then, and rightly so, that he would start as a quarterback as a sophomore in 1993. So he was an exceptional athlete, great competitor, and we had a team that played very well and there was another kid named Lydom who was another really fine player, and we had some real tough players. Jimmy Froelich was an excellent tight end, a big kid. We had size, we had speed, and we had athletes. So that was one of the better freshman teams I ever had.
Yeah, it was a really good team. Now, obviously Stephen, like you said, was a varsity player, but he was playing more receiver that year on the varsity level. So even though he had varsity experience and playing quarterback for the first time, even if it's at the freshman level, you're still learning. How did you think he did? Like, obviously he had a great season, but how did you think he was doing early on? Did you feel that he was confident enough where he could take it to the next level?
I was confident by the end of the year that he was ready to go to the next level. It was interesting. We played the first freshman game we played was against Naugatuck. I don't know why it was done that way, but it was, and they had a pretty good team. And Steven struggled a tiny bit in that game for a while, but then his true athletic talent came to the surface, and we won sort of going away. But as the season went on, we played Notre Dame, we played West Haven, we played the bigger schools, and Steven was very good against all of them.
Yeah, he definitely was. And like I said, that was a tremendous freshman team, which down the road we'll talk about them as seniors. But I mean, you could just tell watching that freshman team that they were going to be something special for Ansonia football for years to come. But Coach, interestingly too about the '92 season, one kid that I really felt was very underrated for Ansonia football that year, both sides of the ball. That was Parrish Edwards. He had a tremendous season at the tight end and defensive end position, and he was a first-year starter, I believe. And I really felt you guys got more than you could have ever expected out of him. He basically exceeded expectations at both positions.
He did. He had played quite a bit on and off the year before, I believe, but I don't know if he's necessarily was a starter. But he got some action. But he had an excellent senior year for us. He was solid as on both sides of the ball, and he was able to catch the ball. But he was a extremely good blocker, and on defense, he was even better. So Parrish had a real nice year for us.
Right, and like I said, you had some returning starters. Three of them that come to mind are the three captains of that team: Greg Soldra, Jason Tinney, and Jeff Press. Just talk about the three of them and how important they were to that season, because they brought back so much experience with them. I think both Greg and Jeff started as sophomores, and I think Jason saw some action as a sophomore. So that was a lot of experience you had from those three captains.
Yeah. They played as sophomores, but they didn't really start. Greg got to start the last game of the year against Naugatuck when we played and beat them in 1990 because we switched our defense from a 50 to a 6-2 against their wishbone, and he went in as the next lineman and did an excellent job that day. And Jeff Press played on all special teams or whatever, but the two linebackers when he was a sophomore were Mike Prosnick and Robbie Clark. So he was behind two senior linebackers, but they all played as juniors, played every single play. Greg Solder was an outstanding two-way tackle on offense and defense. He could run. He ran very well for a big guy. Jeff Press was as tough as nails, great competitor, played fullback in the wishbone where he blocked most of the time, but he was also very talented and was able to catch the ball out of the backfield. And who was the other one you were asking about? Jason Tinney. Jason Tinney was a great back for someone who, if you made the over-under on Jason Tinney as a senior weighing 125, I think most of the people would have bet the under. He was He was he was as small as anybody ever had, but as quick and as tough as could be. And when he ran a punt back for a touchdown in the state championship game, which unfortunately was called back by, let's say, a questionable call, but it was called back. We ended up losing by 2 points. But Jason Tinney could catch the ball, he could run, and he would play. He'd play his heart out. He was a great player to coach.
Yeah, he really was. And you talk about his size. I mean, I used to just, really admire what he did on both sides of the ball because he played defense as well. And you're right, he may have been just 130 pounds as a senior. He wasn't very big, but boy, he played like he was 200 pounds.
Yes, he did.
Yeah. And coach, another thing about that season, which was, kind of funny was I remember the first day of practice for Ansonia, it was kind of delayed because President George Bush had made an appearance at Nolan Field. And I think everybody waited for 4 hours before he finally showed up. So that was something that the town of Ansonia and these Ansonia players got to experience. They got to actually see the president of the United States show up on their football field. That had to be a cool experience, not only for them, but for you guys as
I
well.
enjoyed it very much, especially when he came and we were near the 50-yard line. We were going to give him a ball. And he came up right walking against the fence, shaking hands, and he spoke to different people. It was an experience I'll never forget, and we were fortunate. Even though we waited a long time, it was well worth the wait.
Yeah, it definitely was. So let's talk about the first game of the year, Coach. You had played Holy Cross, and I know that loss from the previous year in the championship game was still on the minds, especially for those seniors. And I think I want to say the first or second play of the game, Jason got hurt on defense, and he was not able to stay in the game. So I think you had to call upon a young sophomore. Maybe it was either Ron Tate or Billy Sisto, but those guys did a great job filling in for Jason. But I really felt that night Jeff Press showed his leadership because he really, played tremendous on the offensive side of the ball when you guys needed him.
That's true. Jeffrey was tremendous, and Ron will take him off the bench, and he certainly made some big runs. Um, and Mike Bernabucci was in there also at the time. But no, I'm sorry, Bernabucci was still a freshman. I'm sorry.
I think it was Billy Sisto, maybe.
Could have been.
Yeah, yeah.
But the main thing with that is we hung in there. We played such great defense against Holy Cross, and we had lost, as you mentioned before, in 1991. We beat Holy Cross in the opening game of the season. Then we had to play them again in the NVL playoff game, and we played in a rainstorm up at Municipal Stadium, and they were able to win 6-0. It was a horrible feel for both teams. And then we ended up playing Holy Cross again in '92 in a playoff at the end of the year for the NBL title again, and that one worked out. That one worked out a little bit better for us.
Yeah, and you guys kind of built a nice new rivalry with them. Not that there wasn't a rivalry before, but that really those 2 or 3 years. I mean, those games were intense, so it was a nice little rivalry that both Holy Cross and Ansonia had with one another. But I really felt that you guys pulled that game out. I think it was 14-12 or 14-13, and I really felt like your players walked off that field that night feeling confident because it was a tough game. It wasn't easy, but they came out with the win. And I think they really felt that they could, do something special that year. But I really look at that first game as like a big victory because they needed to get that loss from the previous year out of their minds. And it also, I felt like it relaxed them the rest of the season when they won that game.
Well, I don't know if it relaxed them, but it made them believe that they still could win no matter what the odds were.
Yep, definitely. And then week 2, Coach, you play a very good Shelton Gales team. I know that year they didn't finish great record-wise, but they had a lot of talent. They had a kid by the name of John Eason, who was a returning starter, had a tremendous junior year. And that was a tough game, and I think you played them, in Shelton. So it wasn't an easy game. But again, Jason came back that game, and vintage Jason Tinney, when it looked like Shelton had the momentum, Jason comes back right away. And in the closing minutes of that fourth quarter with a big touchdown run. And I think you guys won 20-14. But I really felt like, whenever you needed a big play, you could always count on Jason Tinney.
That was another very important game. We had beaten Shelton the year before, and Shelton had an excellent team. They won the Houstonic League title, and we were sort of just coming off the 1990 team. We were very inexperienced. It was a hell of a win for us the year before. So to go over and establish the game with Shelton and to win the game was very important. And there was another receiver we had was an outstanding receiver with that team, Mark Gessner. I think he made some big plays on that day for us. So for the two teams that we began the season with, Holy Cross and Shelton, we played them both on the road, and they were tough battles.
Yeah, definitely was. And then, Coach, week 3 against Kennedy, that was a little scary of a game. I think you guys won 12-0. But what was really scary more than anything else is you could just tell that prior to that game, probably the week in practice, that Jason didn't look like himself. He was still kind of feeling the effects from that Holy Cross game. And I think it was a good call by Coach Hunt to keep him out of that game because he definitely did not look like he was himself.
No, he just didn't have it, and we could tell. And he was quiet. He would never complain, but he just was not able to play. And he was our home run player, and to lose him meant an awful lot. So we struggled, but we were able to win and get out of there with a win.
Yeah, and I talk about, I brought Parrish up before. I think he had a big touchdown in that game. But again, Pacheco played very well in that game, made a lot of great passes. But really, the defense stepped up that night as well. I mean, everybody on, up front from the secondary, everybody really stepped up because that was a tricky game. And I know Kennedy didn't have a good record that year, but they really came ready to play that night. But that defense really, they didn't break. They might have bent a little bit, but they never broke that night, and that was huge.
We were happy to get off the field with another win, Mike, at the time.
Yeah. So now week 4, Coach, you play a very good Sacred Heart team, and I think that was another nail biter, 14-12. And I think there was a fumble probably late in that game where you guys were able to recover it. But that's what I looked at a lot about that 92 team, Coach, is maybe they weren't dominating early on, but they found ways to win. They knew how to win, and that's even more important than, blowing a team out is when you can, scratch and crawl, but you still find those wins.
We were playing them on a Saturday night up there. As a matter of fact, Steven fell down coming through the secondary one time. He was trying to block, and he hit his knee on some metal in the baseball field, and it cut it right up. They had to take him to the hospital halfway through the game. And we were ahead 14-12, and Sacred Heart completed a pass down to about our 3-yard line with maybe a minute to go in the game. They had a first down, and things looked very ominous for us. And on the first down play, we made a good play on defense, and they fumbled. We recovered, and we were able to get out of there with the victory. As I said, it didn't look very promising when they got to the 3-yard line and had first and goal, but we were able to turn it around and move on.
And what a lot of people don't realize, Coach, about that season is after 6 games, you guys had only played 2 home games. I mean, most of your games were on the road to start that season. That's never easy. I mean, especially when you're going to Municipal and you're going to, Torrington and things like that. So, I mean, it's never easy. But this group of kids, they seem to always thrive on adversity. And that was really what I looked at when I looked at a team like the 92 team. And I really think it all starts with that leadership. I just think, the captains and the seniors on that team were a big reason why this team was successful because they kind of made this whole team feel like it was a family.
They certainly did. They certainly did.
Right. So let's talk about the Derby game, Coach, because it was the 75th anniversary. And what a week it was. I mean, the coaches from both Derby and Ansonia met up during that week. They got to reminisce about some of the great Ansonia Derby games. And I think there was even a dinner where a bunch of former alumni from both sides attended, but it was just a tremendous weekend. You're thinking about the Derby game and Derby's thinking about playing you guys and they're preparing and stuff like that. But it was nice when practice was over that you guys got to kind of take that all in and, hang out with Charlie DeCenzo and John DeFrancisco and guys like that and really kind of talk about the great rivalry that you guys built with one another.
Well, Michael, my concerns for that game started the day the practice began, but it amped up noticeably on the Saturday before when I saw Derby play Seymour and I saw David and Roman run for, I believe, 5 touchdowns.
Yeah.
He just owned the field. And I'll never forget that Saturday night. And David Roman has since become a friend of mine. We got a lot of laughs. I knew his dad well, who passed away unfortunately, and and David Roman was just a great player for that team. He really put the team on his back. And I told him that Saturday night, of all things, I had to go to the Schubert, where I really didn't want to go, but I had to go. And so as I was sitting in the Schubert, I couldn't even tell you what was playing. All I was thinking was David Roman for the 2.5 hours of the Schubert. How are we going to stop them? And we did some changes on defense from what we normally do, and that helped us a little. But everything was geared towards stopping David Roman. But then the whole week, getting ready for the 75th anniversary, and Eddie Morse did a tremendous job putting program together, and it was really something to really be proud of. And, as I said, I started going to games back in 56, 57. So I had seen a number of them over the years and started coaching in 72. So there was a lot of Ansonia Derby games, which I still remember, was proud to be a part of. But the game was at Derby, and there was an excellent crowd, as you would imagine. And Derby was good. Derby was very good. We were fortunate to score one touchdown to shut Derby out, but we won 8-0. And Dave Pacheco scored on a quarterback sneak from the 8 or 9 yard line, which doesn't normally happen. But we were able to hit a seam in the middle, and he ran right up and scored. And Derby had a couple of opportunities, and they almost came back, and they kept battling right to the end. But it was a great game to be a part of, and again, it's a shame the rivalry isn't what it once was, because those games were really something special.
Yeah, and the thing I noticed about that game more than anything else is the respect that the veteran players had for both teams. Your guys, when the game ended, I can remember Soldier and Tinney especially. They went right up to Dave Van Roman, and to this day, whenever I see Greg Soldier, he always talks about the game that Ann Roman had on defense. He had a tremendous game. And Dave was very gracious in defeat. He went right up to Jason, because they kind of were the two main backs for both programs, and they had a respect for one another. And really, when you're playing against one another, it's a battle, and you're conditioned to not like each other while you're playing. But you could just tell after that game the respect that the seniors on both sides had for each other. And I really thought that was the nice part about it is they realized they were in a dogfight the entire game, and they kind of respected what both sides of each school went through in that game.
That's true. There was a tremendous respect for Derby, and especially David Roman, and obviously Charlie. Charlie's a coach. Charlie came. I remember when Charlie, as I might have said before on the show, we were in the 4th grade at St. Mary's School when Charlie moved, I believe, from Bridgeport to Derby, and came into our classroom, and he became a friend then, and he's been a friend since that was probably 56. So you can add up the years, Michael, but there's Charlie's been a friend of a lot of people in the Valley, especially through football. Tremendous coach, tremendous guy, and the whole Derby staff. We're, as I said, we enjoyed their company for 364 days a year, but on the 365th day, nobody was a friend, but nobody was an enemy either.
Yeah, it really was, and that's the one thing I miss about the rivalry is, I felt like everything just stopped on that Saturday. And when Derby and Ansonia played, that was the only thing, that was the only topic you should be talking about if you lived in the Valley. And, it was just a tremendous rivalry that if you didn't get an opportunity to play in it, I feel bad for those group of kids during the years of 2004 to 2009 who didn't get to play in it, because I think every kid who puts on a Derby or Ansonia uniform deserves to play in that game.
It's funny. I was talking to Chris Anderson a couple of weeks ago at a football foundation thing. We were talking about different things. I said, and there's a lot of respect. He's an excellent coach, and a lot of respect for Ansonia and Naugatuck. But when you lose to Naugatuck or beat Naugatuck, you don't see them throughout the winter. If you go to a basketball game, maybe you do, but it's, I don't know, what's it, 8 miles away? It seems like it's 80 miles away. You don't go up, hang around Naugatuck. You don't go, But when you lost the Derby, and you would see Derby every single day of the year until next year. I lived in Derby for many of those years. But whether you lived in Ansonia or not, you probably drive through Derby of 7 days a week, you drive into it 5 times, and you it was just you just knew the players better, you knew the families better. There was just so much that embodied that rivalry. There was a famous rivalry out in Ohio, Massillon versus Canton McKinley. Massillon and Canton abut the way the Derby and Ansonia do. They're bigger schools, but that rivalry has been going on. It continues to go on. It's one of the great rivalries in sports, and the towns are bigger than we are, but it was just that same kind of intensity. And as I said, there was I've been to a lot of games in the state and seen a lot of great rivalries, but especially for a non-Thanksgiving Day rivalry, to have something like Ansonia Derby in the middle of October or late October when the teams were very, very good. And some years one team was better than the other, but the intensity was like no other.
Yeah, it really was just a tremendous rivalry. So, Coach, you touched on it a little bit when the show began, but you had to go play Holy Cross for a second straight year for the title game. And I mean, was did Jack? I mean, I'm sure he probably had it in his head, we are not losing this game this time. But I mean, were there any, you know, anxiousness during that week preparing for them again?
There's some, Mike, but to be honest with you, Thanksgiving was coming up 6 days later, or 7 days later, and then the state playoffs. We knew we were going to be in the playoffs, so that was important. But there were bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, and you guys came out with a great win against Holy Cross. This time the game wasn't even close. I
No,
mean,
we played very well in that. We played exceptionally well that night.
yeah, so you win another MVL title and you go into Thanksgiving with a good feeling. And I think it rained that day on Thanksgiving. You guys played Naugatuck on a Friday night, and I'll
We
never
did.
forget. A funny image that I remember. I don't know if you're going to remember it, but the first play of the game, you guys throw a deep pass, you score a touchdown. But I remember some guy was not getting off the field almost, and he almost got knocked over by one of your players. But first play of the game, you guys score. You go up 7-0, and I'll tell you,
we had Gessner on a play action pass for about 70 yards, and we thought we could capitalize on that. We did, and the game was really in our hands from then going forward.
Right, definitely was. And I think that was important too, Coach, that you guys, set the tone right away. And winning that game was huge. Whenever you beat Naugatuck, it's a big deal. But the fact that the game was pretty much over by the middle of the third quarter, you guys were able to rest people and get ready for that New London game. But it seemed like to me that Jack Hunt very seldom lost on Thanksgiving. Like that was really his game, and he had an unbelievable record on Thanksgiving.
He certainly did, Mike. I believe he was 17-2 against Naugatuck, the greatest record that any coach, maybe in the history of Connecticut, has had in any rivalry series. So he certainly did an amazing job there.
Yeah, definitely did. So, Coach, let me ask you. It was obviously second year in a row you got to play New London. They still had a great team. I felt like that night, Coach, that it was just a great football game between two great teams. And you guys, I think, were down 21-7 and made a tremendous comeback towards the end of the game. But just talk about that game and the rivalry you've had with New London, because dating back as early as 1987, that really became a good rivalry for both schools. But that was a tremendous game that night. Yep, I think we lost Coach Sponheimer. He was having a little trouble with his picture, so we'll try to get him back on. But folks, I think the biggest thing is with Coach Sponheimer is just his memory. I mean, he can remember everything, and that's not easy to do when you've coached as long as he has. But he is always he doesn't forget a thing, and he's spot on with everything he says. And you can just tell the love he has for coaching Ansonia football, as he does, as Coach Lisi, who's been there, a million years, Kevin Rowley, guys like that. And then, of course, now you have Coach Brackett, who's been there. I think Coach Brackett's been there 17 years now, something like that. And he's really carried it on. Jack Hunt had him be his successor, and he's done a great job. And that program's in the playoffs again for which seems like every year they're there. I mean, they are always in the playoffs, and it's always fun to reminisce with Coach Sponheimer because he's a student of the game, and he just knows his football inside and out. I mean, I'll tell you, he's always been an important part of Ansonia football. But if he ever wanted to be a head coach, like if he decided years ago to take that next step, he would have been an unbelievable head coach because he just really knows his football inside and out. And he never looked. He's there all the time. I mean, look at the dedication he's put in. He's been with that staff. I want to say this is his 50th year or 51st year, but he came there, I think, in 1973. And, he's been there for all the glory years of Ansonia football. I mean, he's been on that staff himself and Bobby Lisi. And I bring those two up the most because they've been there. They were there with Coach McAllister. Then they were there, with coach when Lisi took over as head coach. They were there. I don't think Lisi coached with Morrell, but I do think Sponheimer did. And then, of course, they were there with Jack Hunt for the 19 years he was there, and they've been with Coach Brockett for 17. So, I mean, they love that program, and they continue time and time again to, go out there and give their dedication and commitment to that program, year in and year out. And it's really, a testament to, their work ethic that they have. They love that program. I mean, because, after a while, coaches, they retire, they just have enough. These guys have never had enough. They love it. I mean, he still loves it to this day, you could tell. And I mean, that's always been his thing is he just loves Ansonia football. And he has demonstrated that, like I said, since 1973 when he first got there. But a 92 Ansonia team, I said this many times, they were one of the most underrated Ansonia football teams of all time. A lot of people, I don't want to say Ansonia people, because I think Ansonia people believed that they would have a great year. But there were a lot of people that predicted they were going to go 8-2 at best. They were going to miss the playoffs, that it was too young of a team. There was uncertainty, like I said, with the quarterback, and Pacheco did a great job. But that team, you should never say they're going to have a down year because they're so well coached. And I think we got Coach Sponheimer back. And
I lost you on my screen for a minute or two.
Yep. No
Did you
problem.
hear me? Were you able to hear me speak what I was saying?
I heard you speak, and then the picture just left completely. But while you were gone, I just was talking about, that 92 team a little more in the years there. But, Coach, back to the championship game, I just thought it was a tremendous job by two great teams. And it was unfortunate that somebody had to lose that night. But I felt like both teams just played their hearts out, and it was just a classic championship game.
It was. I don't know if you heard me when I was speaking about Fletcher playing for Penn State in the Rose Bowl, almost running the kickoff back 75 yards. And because he broke right before the half when we were, I believe the score was tied or we were down 7. He broke about an 80-yard run with 40 seconds to go in the first half, which was almost a killer. But we just battled back and almost got it. But it was it's one we always remember is one that got away.
And, I think about the touchdown you guys scored to make it 21-19. Paris Edwards went for the pass. It kind of went off his hands. And you see him, he's kind of banging the ground with his hands. And Jeff Press catches it. And I felt like right there, you guys were going to win the game because I just felt like you get a great, play like that where that happens. The momentum's on your side. Unfortunately, you guys missed the 2-point conversion. But what really stands out to me the most, Coach, everybody I've talked to over the years, and I've never talked to the seniors about losing that game and what happened in the locker room, but I've talked to many of the underclassmen, and really Jeff Press, Greg Soldier, Jason Tinney, again, their leadership, and the seniors as well, because there were so many kids heartbroken in that locker room, and those guys really spoke up and said, we had a great year. There's nothing to be ashamed about. You guys got to keep your heads up and stuff. And that's why, you kind of feel bad that they didn't win a championship because these guys really understood the value of what team was all about.
I don't know. There was a little break, but I don't know if you heard me when I was talking about Jeff Press.
Yeah.
That's one of the great hustle plays in the history of Ansonia football. Jeff went out to the flat as the fullback. He was about 15 yards from Parrish when that ball was left to Pacheco's hand. Normally if you're in the flat, you stand and you watch the play. He had played every single play in that game. He sprinted to the end zone, 15 yards. Parrish and the other defensive back were fighting for the ball. Jeff got there and stole the ball and scored the touchdown. It
Yeah.
was one of the great hustle plays I've seen in my career.
Yeah, and Jeff Press was so much fun to watch, Coach, because he really like was what you want an Ansonia football player to be. He was very coachable, and he was also a coach on the field. And I really felt like he did a great job mentoring Pete Reynolds because he knew Pete was going to take his spot at fullback when he left. And I just think that like this kid's leadership. I mean, when you look at like somebody that's a captain, when you talk about a captain of a team. Jeff Press really exemplified what that meant.
He absolutely did.
Yeah, it
Absolutely.
definitely did. So, Coach, let's talk about '93. I thought that was one of the best Ansonia teams I've ever seen. I know people may not say that because they lost to Naugatuck, but when I looked at the talent on that team that year, both offensively and defensively, how could anybody argue with what I'm saying? Because I think the first 4 or 5 games of that season, the defense didn't even give up one offensive touchdown.
That's true. We had some really tough defenders. Jamie Leahy was a great senior. Lucian Perillo, um, Billy Lassou. But the thing that really helped was that we had two outstanding classes as juniors and sophomores that really helped that team. Don't forget Stephen went in as the quarterback. Ronald Tate began a starter. He was a starter as a junior, as a tailback. Froelich came in.
Yeah.
And there was just so many people that made that team good. And as I said, we went into the Naugatuck game. We were undefeated. Naugatuck had lost the week before to Seymour, and interestingly, they lost by a touchdown. And Seymour won the state title that year. And Naugatuck had fumbled twice, once going in from the 4-yard line, and once coming out at the 4-yard line. Seymour recovered both of them. They took a touchdown away by that, and then they got a touchdown by that. Now, the Seymour was a very good team. Naugatuck was an excellent team. Naugatuck was a double L champion that year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the last state championship Naugatuck has won. And in the game, we were in a battle. The kid, Master Petro, was playing quarterback for Naugatuck, doing a nice job. We were down 7-0 and driving in late in the third quarter. And we had 4th and 2 going for a first down at about the 10-yard line. And we had switched Ronald to run the ball towards our bench, and he got hit right at the first down marker. I don't know whether he would have made it or not. It would have been close, but unfortunately, there was a fumble, and they picked it up and ran it in 70, 80 yards for a touchdown to make it 14-0. And then late in the game, we were taking a lot of chances to try and get the ball back, and then they drove the ball down to our 1-yard line or 2-yard lines and took a late timeout just to get the last touchdown in. So Naugatuck outplayed us. They deserved to win. It's one of Jack's 2 losses in 19 years against Naugatuck. So it didn't happen very often, thankfully.
No, and you gotta eventually expect that there's going to be a game here and there you're going to lose to them because I mean it is a rivalry. It's Thanksgiving, and that was a true. We'll talk about it on the next show, but that '94 Naugatuck team was unbelievable. But '93 and '94 Naugatuck, they were tremendous. But when I think about that team, you made a good point about the underclassmen stepping up because you did have a lot of sophomores and juniors start that year. But then I think about some of the seniors who got varsity experience for the first time. Shane Edmonds.
Shane Edmonds played nose guard, did a great job.
Yeah, I think he made all Valley, so he stepped up. And then, of course, Lucian Perillo had played varsity the year before, but he was just a very underrated,
He was.
lineman.
He was strong and tough, really a tough two-way player.
Yeah, he really was. And then, you talked about, when you coached them as freshmen, both Jason Lightham and Jim Froelich, they both shared the tight end position that year and both did an outstanding job. And then Gregorio, I think, started as a defensive end that year.
He did because he was a linebacker as a freshman, but we had linebackers that were older and more experienced, but he had to be on the field someplace. But I meant to say when Master Petro was the quarterback, but they shifted in the middle. They shifted as the season went on, and they put whatchamacallit in there as quarterback, Joey Edmonds, and he changed that Naugatuck team around. He was just a tremendous player.
Oh yeah, he definitely was. And that's the thing about it, Coach, is those years, like I said, maybe because, like I said, I was on Derby's football team those years, but it just felt like high school football, especially in the Valley back then. The talent that was on all those Valley schools, especially Naugatuck and Ansonia, was just unbelievable. I mean, you had so many. Kids do start as sophomores, but it's very rare that you have 6 or 7 of them start, and you guys had that on
You're
your.
right.
And
We
some,
did.
Zabina was the kicker. I mean, Coughlin playing quarterback, and we didn't even really talk about his first game as quarterback, but what a game he had against Holy Cross for his first game. He really showed you that he could take this quarterback position and be a threat that year.
He certainly was. He was a totally dedicated athlete. Certainly became the player of the year when he was a senior in the state. We've had many players of the years more than anybody else, but he ranks up with everybody as one of the best.
Yeah, he's the type of kid, he could just play any position you asked him to play. And then, Coach, I think about too, we were talking about the Derby game the year before. It was 8-0, but boy, this is why I really looked at this Ansonia team as one of the best, even though probably the best team never to win a state title, because they just, that Derby game, I think they were up 35-0 at the half. They really just, once they got going, you could not stop that team. It was one of the best Ansonia teams, like I said. I mean, people forget that sometimes because they didn't win a championship, but that team could play with anybody.
Unfortunately, and it happened even the Derby one year, happened to Derby in 87, happened to us in 1990, happened to us in 1993. All 3 teams were 9-1 and didn't make the playoffs. That would never happen now. And that's one of the good things the playoffs have done by increasing the numbers. I think it's ridiculous if they if they want to increase it anymore, because you're getting a number of 5-5 or 4-6 in this year with prep. But I mean, in those days, at West Haven in 1990, maybe after Thanksgiving, the 2 best teams in the state might have been Ansonia and West Haven. West Haven had beaten St. Joe's. We had beaten Naugatuck. And we were playing a little bit better, and so West Haven was playing very good, and obviously Derby is still playing very good, even though they had a couple overtime games. But and Danbury got beat on the night that Derby won. And Derby was rightfully the number 1 team. They had beaten us, and rightfully so. They deserved to be number 1. But at the end of the year, West Haven and us were each 9-1, and neither one made the playoffs.
Yeah, and Coach, I was always in favor of them, changing the playoff format a little bit. I liked it when they would do the 2 games, the semis and the finals, and I'm okay with even doing the 3 games. But what I'm not okay with, and you just brought it up, is I'm not okay with seeing a team 5-5 or 4-6 get in the playoffs, because to me, like, the regular season still has to mean something. And it's almost like, and it's no disrespect to Fairfield Prep. They have a great football program, and they just had a down year. But getting in that 4-6, I mean, is that really a playoff team, honestly?
I agree. Whether it be Fairfield Prep or anybody, I mean, Watertown's still alive. Watertown went 5-5 in the NVL. Watertown didn't play Naugatuck. They played us, and we whacked them pretty good. Seymour opened up the season with Watertown, and they were ahead 28-0 at the half.
Yeah.
Watertown's schedule worked out well for them, and they won a playoff game the other night. So I think, I mean, when we started out, there were 4 classes, and 2 teams went in from each class. I mean, there were 8 teams that got in, and rightfully so. They increased it. It went from 8 to 12 to 24, I believe, and now it's up to 48. But I don't think it should go any higher at all.
No, I really don't, because like I've said to you, you deserve to make the playoffs based on your record. That's my opinion, and I just don't see how 4-6 or 5-5 is really, 5-5 is a 500 year, but it's not a good year, really. It's an okay year.
No.
I just don't, I'm even more for like you have to be 7-3 at max to get in, but I know they've put some teams in, obviously, if you go 6-4, but I rather, for the most part, see a team with 2 losses get in. I'm not big when somebody has 3, but I could accept it a little more there. But once it goes past 3, I just don't think it's like it makes any sense to me.
I agree with you, Mike, 100%.
Yeah. Well, Coach, this is fun like it always is. I have a great time doing this, and we're going to continue to do it. But I know you got a big game Sunday, and I know you guys will come ready to play. And I wanted to ask you, Coach, is the game at Derby again this
The
Sunday?
game is at Derby. Yes, it is.
Right. And that's the other thing, Coach. I got to believe eventually Ansonia is going to get turf, but it's got to be pretty cool to get to play on that very new Derby field. It's
That's a
still
beautiful field to play on. We
yeah.
are part of the 5 referendums that passed in the last election, one of which is to put turf at Nolan Field finally. I mean, people have debated it. I have been an advocate of turf on Nolan Field for 20 or 30 years. I always like the best footing for teams no matter what. And you can debate it if you want, but some people are talking about the old grass fields and everything else, but I personally have been an advocate for turf many, many years.
Yeah, and you really like I said, it's nice Ansonia's getting to play on a nice field like Derby's and a good facility. But Ansonia fans and their players, coaches as well, deserve to have home games on their actual field. So hopefully that gets done soon. But thank you again, Coach. We'll talk soon, and best of luck on Sunday.
Michael, thank you very much. Always enjoy speaking with you.
Appreciate it, Coach. You as well. And there you have it, folks. That's the one and only John Sponheimer. I'm Mike Kenichi. This was Spooney's Scrapbook, and we'll see you next time. Take care.